welcome to Tracy Mommy Reads. I am back again with another book review. Today, I am going to be talking about the book Somebody's Daughter by Ashley C. Ford. Somebody's Daughter. And this particular book is a memoir, okay? And I don't think I've read a memoir since maybe Cicely Tyson's, like a few years ago. It's been a while since I've read a memoir. This one is pretty short, and I think one of the reasons is because the woman is relatively young. I mean, I think she's still in her 30s. She is a writer, and she writes for, some well-known publications. Like, I want to say Vogue, Time, Elle, those type of magazines. I can't tell you for certain if she's written for those, but I do know that she's written, done a lot of celebrity interviews, some big celebrity interviews. Look, in the back of her blurb, it says that she's written for Teen Vogue, New York Magazine, the New York Times, Elle, BuzzFeed, and many other web and print publications. She's also been named among Forbes magazine's 30 under 30 in media and Variety's Power of New York. So there's that. I saw this book where somebody was going on and on about how they thought it was pretty good. And the thing that I thought was interesting was that she has done some noteworthy things, no doubt about that. But she's not like someone that is very well known or at a, upper echelon of celebrity or anything like that. So I thought it was interesting that she had penned a memoir that had been received so well and on lists and things like that. So I was like very intrigued. And as you can see, I did a lot of flags. I will also say that I picked this book because I am doing a book club, and I use that term very loosely. I think I've mentioned this to many of you before, but I have a community that I've started. Well, I started like 5 years ago, and it's called The Face of 50 Plus. And this year, I just, told the ladies that we were going to read 4 books, one each quarter. And this was actually our first read. The book club is open to anyone who wants to join at 18 and up. Let me specify that because a couple of the books may not be, age appropriate for anyone younger than that. But if you go to the website, faceof50plus.com, and I'll link it in the description, and it's probably up here on the screen. But if you click on book club from the homepage, it will take you to the details and how you can join and all of that, because we're probably going to do a couple of Zooms, one in the app book clubs, and then potentially a meetup in Houston. So, but that'll probably be towards the end of the year. So anyway, without further ado, let's talk about Somebody's Daughter. So Ashley Ford, and she is here. I'll show you a picture. She's a young Black woman. Like I said, I think she's still in her 30s. And primarily the book focuses on her life from like a child, like elementary school age, through like the death of her grandmother. Okay. And the thing, like when I first read the first chapter, I was like, okay, so, why should we care about her story when it maybe is similar to any other Black woman or young Black woman's story in America? Because in the first chapter, she gets a phone call from her mom, and you could tell there's their relationship is very surface level, because she says she doesn't, I don't say what I'm thinking, or she keeps it, cordial, or they're like talking around or at each other, like there's a story there, which we get, right? But her mother calls to tell her that her father is being released from prison. And throughout the majority of this book and throughout the majority of her life up until adulthood, her father had been incarcerated. So her book, I feel like, just really explores what it's like as a young Black girl growing up with a single mother and a father who, I mean, her father's in prison. She knows where he is, but there are a lot of people who are in that same situation where either they don't even know their father, or their father is an absentee father. And in some cases, maybe the father is in the picture, so to speak, but he's just not in the home. And sometimes even that, it's hard to parent a child, in my opinion. This is just my opinion. It's hard to parent a child that you only see a couple of days a week, because routines and tones and different things have already been set by that primary parent. And I know from watching, this kind of play out before, it's like, if you're the parent who doesn't have full custody of the child, you don't want to spend time really raising them or parenting truly. You want to spend time with them, like quality time, which often consists of just, good times, happy times. Let's go to the movie. Let's go to McDonald's. Let's run amok and do whatever. And then you gotta, before you know it, the weekend is so short, it's over, after catching up on their lives and what they've been doing, you got to hand them off to the other parent. So being raised in an environment where you don't have both parents, whether it's a young woman or a young man, I feel like those individuals will be lacking something by way of seeing certain parental behavior modeled. And let's say, like for me, I was raised by a single mom, so I feel like I can speak a little freely on this. It was just me and my sister and my mom. And my mom had boyfriends or whatever, but we never like had a father in the home that, provided any type of guidance, discipline, protection. And as a result, you grow up fiercely independent because you saw your mom basically holding it down. And nobody told her what to do. Who is this man coming here thinking he's going to tell me what to do? And it's that whole dynamic. And the other side of that, maybe like for boys, if they are raised by single mothers and their mothers are constantly doting on them and they don't see a man like helping to ease that load, they may go out into the world thinking women are supposed to cater to them and instead of like helping to ease a load, So and I know there's exceptions to every single rule. You have some people that were raised by single parents and maybe even the opposite. Maybe they were raised by their father and they go on to be totally, well-functioning, well-positioned citizens. But the vast majority do not. So you say what you want to say. If it's not your experience, that's fine. And we'll move on. But a lot of Ashley's upbringing just basically formed her into the person that she became. And I think writing, because she's like a writer, as I talked about at the top of the video, was an outlet and an escape for her. When there may have been chaos in her home. Initially, it was just her and her brother. Over the years, I think her mom, I don't know if her mom got remarried or she was just in relationships, but she ended up having 2 more kids. So altogether, she has 3 siblings, 2 brothers and a sister. So there were 4 kids. She had a very close relationship with her grandmother, her mother's mother. And that also got me to thinking, because in a lot of Black homes, and even though she's much younger than I am, it's obvious, like either her grandmother's generation or her mother's generation, what happens or what happened, for those of you not familiar, and I'll take my own personal story, but I've seen, I've heard, I know people directly. It seems like there are some experiences in the Black community that are just universal, that the majority of us can relate to no matter where we live. Well, my generation, I was born in 1970. My generation was the first generation post-segregation. So I remember being a child and like my grandmother lived on a street. There was a house in between her. Her sister lived in the other house. They were like on the same street. Her other two sisters, they lived on the other side of town, but they lived across the street from each other. Like, we were so close, like our families, and, even our second and third cousins, we saw them with an alarming amount of frequency, at every family gathering, every single weekend. And a big part of that had to do with the fact, like I said, we were the first generation post-segregation. Prior to that, it was very limited places Black people could go. And there wasn't a lot of race mingling. So people stayed within their own communities. They stayed primarily within their own families. So the family unit was a lot closer. And that was one thing that I could relate to in her book, because the way that she described it was like they lived in an apartment or a house or something, and then because she would go out the back door, the front door, and go up some stairs, and that was her grandmother, where her grandmother lived. So they were very, very close to to each other as far as proximity. And her mother's siblings would come over, and then they had children, and they would all be there, just all growing up together. And there was one point where she left to go with her grandmother to live with her great grandfather, which was her grandmother's dad. He lived on a farm or something, and she went with her grandmother, and that just wasn't unheard of, back then. Especially once her mom had 3 kids at that point, it was like taking the load off the parent and someone else kind of taking responsibility or helping out, with this kid. But as she got older, and this is another thing I will say, I think that children in general, because they are needy, obviously they're needy. They need a lot of nurturing. They need a lot of time. They need a lot of attention. And a lot of times when a parent is overwhelmed, especially if they're a single parent and they have multiple children, it's hard to do that, especially if you're the breadwinner. I got to work. I got to clean. I got to cook. I got to come home and take care of these little kids. Like, you're doing probably all you can to just make sure that they're well fed and well taken care of. So a lot of kids kind of miss out on that extra loving or whatever, because most parents, that's how they show their love. It's like, I have kept a roof over your house. I've kept you safe. So I think early on, like, her mom, she was young when she had her. So she probably was missing out on her own life. And you never know how that's affecting someone, because like I was going to say, a lot of kids forget that their parents were kids and young adults before they ever had them. They had dreams, they had hopes, and you can have the conversation all day long about their choices and their decisions, and nobody asked to come here and all that, but stuff happens. And here we are. It does not negate a person's experience or the fact that maybe they were not capable of being a parent, but yet they became one. You know what I'm saying? So her and her mom, I feel like she was close to her grandmother, and her and her mom, like, they were here. Then this gulf became between them. And it seems like when she got older, it was maybe her mom was just proud of her, and they just kind of focused on pleasantries instead of really unpacking why their relationship kind of fell apart. Because there was a part, and this has happened before too, where you have especially single mothers, because a lot of times, like I said, they're looking too for attention and nurturing and maybe someone to lighten their load. So her mother had, a boyfriend who said something to Ashley, and when she told her mother told her she was lying, and why are you trying to mess this up for me? You know what I'm saying? So it was just a lot of stuff that was done over the course of her adolescence and growing up between her and her mom that just, never gave them an opportunity to be maybe as close as either of them maybe even wished, right? There is also, I think, some conversation that needs to be had around how girls go from being seen as little, girls, and they're innocent and they're children, and as they start to develop and their bodies change, how the male gaze is trained on them, even though they may only be 11 or 12 or 13, but they start to develop, and the unwanted attention and commentary. I mean, I would venture to say more than half of the women, you know, in this world probably have at some point um, come across that, whether somebody gave them a lingering gaze or an inappropriate hand here or an inappropriate comment, um, you know, from someone who is much older and had no business doing that. Because, you know, the culture of sexualizing young girls and women, it's just that's where we are. You know, it's prevalent in movies and ads and music, you know, and unfortunately she had a situation that happened to her, um, you know, that was something, somebody she trusted, and she told no, and he didn't take that for an answer. So, you know, that was a challenging part to get through. But I feel like her story, just like I felt with the Michelle Obama story, the commonalities with women, with Black women specifically, how we can have been raised in such different environments, such different regions, locations, and we have such similar experiences in a lot of ways through growing up with family, with just the world, you know, in general, especially in America. There was also like she kind of chronicled her uh like formative years in school, and teachers that help and teachers that hurt, you know, because I don't think they realize, I mean, most teachers will see, you know, at least for the school year, if you have the same group of kids, um, you will probably see that child and interact with them more than their parents, because they're with you every single day, Monday through Friday, for like 8 hours or whatever the time frame is, you know, not including summers or whatever. So it's not a teacher's job or responsibility to necessarily raise a child, but praising them, you know, if they're doing well, or trying to offer, you know, correction when they aren't. And I know it's easily said than done. A lot of teachers are grossly underpaid, their classrooms are overrun. But I just think, when if you have a child who potentially is having issues at home, and they're being screamed and yelled at all the time and told that they're, you know, no good and this and that, then they go to school and they hear that same, it's like a confirmation from the teacher, because they're burnt out and they're stressed out. I think that some kids, they just lean into that behavior. You know, this is all that's expected of me. This is what they think of me anyway. I think children are a lot smarter than we give them credit for when it comes to that type of thing. And like I said, she did have some teachers that weren't very nice to her, but but she had enough that were, that it kind of curbed her behavior that had kind of started to go off the rails a little bit. And you know, like what I mentioned about the over sexualizing young women, I feel like every young woman, a young girl, once she starts to, you know, develop or go through that process, especially Black girls. I don't know about, I can't speak to white women, and I can't speak to all Black girls' experience, but I know enough Black women, and I was, you know, a young Black girl, and, you know, I know in our community this type of thing is said, and it angers me. I'm gonna just read this. You know, this was after, you know, she had started to develop, and I guess her mom and grandmother could kind of see, like, you know, eyes were on her or whatever. My mother and grandmother would shake their heads at me and lament that I was too friendly, and that men and boys would take that the wrong way. My grandmother would say, all that smiling will get you in trouble if the wrong person thinks it's cute. And it's just sad that we have to police girls and their attire and their attitudes and their behavior, but boys just get a pass. That don't sit well with my spirit. It's not the kind of son I'm raising. But anyway, yeah, I know that it's not a lot of people's cup of tea, you know, reading memoirs, especially of someone you don't know, because honestly, when especially celebrities, when they put their books out, you're looking for tea, you're looking for gossip, you're looking to see if they're going to address that thing that happened, that was in the tabloids or whatever. So there's incentive there because, I mean, the average celebrity that puts out a book, they're normally at some pinnacle of success, whether they're at the end of their life, like Cicely Tyson, or they're kind of, have solidified themselves in their career, like Viola Davis, or even somebody like Trevor Noah. He was a well-known comedian before becoming a Daily Show host, and now all the endeavors that he has. But there was still a juicy story there, like his mom had gotten pregnant for a white man in South Africa, and that whole thing was illegal. So, there's always this enticement of something juicy that you're going to get from reading a well-known person's memoir. I would argue, just depending on your experience in this country, especially as a Black woman, I really feel like there is something to be gleaned from her memoir, and even for younger women who maybe have gone through some similar things, and just how she kind of, ended up coming from a place of being unsure of who she was, maybe sometimes not feeling pretty, just common things that make up a lot of people's childhood and adolescence and young adulthood. How she kind of came from that to really fully loving and accepting herself, and having experiences in college, and surrounding herself with a really good community and good group of friends who accepted her for who she was. She didn't have to pretend or be anything different, and I think that's pretty key. And I can tell, like, I was up in her Instagram. She seems like a very, very sweet young woman. She's very quirky, like her attire and, just different things. She's not like the classic beauty or person that you see influencing people, or what you would think about when you think about somebody interviewing celebrities. But she seems hella comfortable in her own skin and loves herself, which is how it should be. And she's married to a guy, I think he was her friend for a long time. But the biggest thing that I got from this book is, and what you can tell by how short it is, her story's not over. She will probably be able to write another memoir in her later years about the life that she's living now. I think that this was just a way to get out how she felt about that situation, and potentially closing the chapter on all of that, so that she can move on to the next chapters and the next story and the next book. And in the end, now back to how it started, right? It started with her mom calling her, saying her dad was getting out of jail. So then that's like a present day type chapter. And then we get all the back stuff. And in the end, well, let's go back. In the middle, we find out why her dad was in jail. And I will tell you, even though this is an actual account of someone's life, I was like hoping that wasn't true. She never said that it wasn't. Like, she never said that, oh, my dad denied that, or, he got framed, or so I'm going with the whole, notion that what he was in jail for, he did. And that's just unfortunate. I mean, there were no details given. There doesn't really need to be any, but given something that happened to her, for her dad to have, potentially being arrested for that same thing, that kind of just left me with a heartbreaking, feeling. But in the end, she did forgive him for not being there, for not, for being the person that he was, and he had been in jail a long time. And she went to see him at one point. She went maybe once when she was a kid, but it had been like a decade or so before she saw him. And in the book, she talks about being in college and going to see him. And just, she wanted a relationship with him, so she had to let everything else go. And even on her Instagram, I saw there was a picture of him. It must have been like when he came home or something. They were like embracing and she was crying or whatever. So I'm assuming that they have a relationship, you know, to this day or whatever. And I feel like she doesn't like really get into it in the book, but when I think about the title, you know, there's this thing like when we do hear conversations or hear advice or narratives or whatever, when men are being out of pocket, you know, or they do things, you know, there's this thing that they say, well, what if that was your daughter? What if you know, everybody is somebody's daughter. You shouldn't have to have empathy because you have to put your daughter in that person's shoes. You have empathy because she's somebody's daughter, you know? And I feel like maybe that was kind of a nod to that whole thing of how people are treated, how women specifically are treated. And a lot of times, especially Black women, we don't get a lot of empathy or sympathy unless somebody's told to imagine that being your daughter, you know. So yeah, I enjoyed the book. You know, I've heard mixed reviews. I mean, well, I haven't heard mixed reviews. I started reading it because all the reviews that I heard and people that I saw that had read it were talking about how they thought it was really good, and I concur. But I did tell a friend to read it. Don't think she was impressed. Don't think she was impressed. But I do feel like because of just all the things I've said here in this video, that it's going to make for a very enlightening and lively conversation when we do have our book club meeting. So, yeah, we're going to be talking about Somebody's Daughter. So if you have read Somebody's Daughter, and you want to join in on the conversation, like I said, go to faceof50plus.com and click on book clubs, and it'll give you some more information about, you know, how you can join the Zoom to talk about the book, Somebody's Daughter. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure that you like this video and go ahead and take the opportunity to subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. And for everyone who has subscribed, thank you, thank you, thank you. You guys enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I'll see you next week. Bye.